The fluorescent lights of the abandoned particle research facility flickered with the rhythm of Sarah Chen's increasingly frantic keystrokes. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against dirty windows, a fitting backdrop to what most would consider a last-ditch effort of a dying career. At 32, Sarah was already considered a has-been in the world of theoretical quantum physics. 3 years ago, she'd been the darling of Stanford's quantum research department, her groundbreaking papers promising revolutionary communication technologies. Now she was running experiments in a facility that was more rust than infrastructure, funded by a government grant so small it was practically an insult. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, the third pot since midnight. The computer screens surrounding her workstation displayed a chaos of mathematical equations, quantum probability models, and signal analysis graphs that would look like nonsense to anyone but the most specialized researchers. What Sarah was attempting was mathematically impossible. Traditional quantum communication relied on precise, predictable entanglement. She was trying something different, a communication method that embraced uncertainty, that turned randomness into a feature, not a bug. Her latest algorithm was a wild fusion of quantum mechanics, information theory, and what her former colleagues would charitably call pure speculation. Each simulation ran for milliseconds before collapsing, generating patterns that defied conventional understanding. Most researchers would have given up weeks ago. Sarah saw something else in those fragmented results, a glimpse of something profound. The facility's ancient air conditioning system rattled, momentarily breaking her concentration. She glanced at the photo tucked beside her primary monitor. Her mother, a brilliant mathematician who had always told her that the most important discoveries happen when everyone else says something is impossible. One more simulation, Sarah muttered, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. The computer hummed, then whirred, then suddenly erupted in a cascade of data that was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The signal patterns weren't just complex, they were alive. Each mathematical representation seemed to breathe, to pulse with an intelligence that transcended traditional computational models. Sarah's hand froze over the keyboard. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand in that moment, was that her simulation had done more than generate an interesting data set. It had sent out a signal that would be detected thousands of light years away, by entities that had been watching and waiting for something precisely like this. The Nexus Collective's most advanced scanning systems, which had monitored countless emerging civilizations, suddenly found themselves confronting something entirely unexpected. A signal that wasn't just a communication, it was a challenge. In that moment, humanity's fate began to change. Sarah Chen, wearing the same wrinkled shirt she'd had on for 2 days, completely unaware of the cosmic significance of her work, reached for her now-cold coffee and took another sip. Just another late night in a dying research facility. Or so it seemed. The Nexus Collective's primary observation hub existed in a state between matter and pure information, a massive computational construct that spanned multiple dimensional layers. Overseer Cryax, a being whose existence transcended biological limitations, processed trillions of data streams simultaneously. For millennia, the collective had perfected the art of civilization assessment. Emerging species were cataloged, evaluated, and either integrated or eliminated with surgical precision. Cryax had personally overseen the processing of 2,317 distinct civilizations. Each one followed a predictable pattern. Technological emergence, initial complexity, followed by inevitable simplification or extinction. The anomalous signal first appeared as a microscopic perturbation, so small that any lesser system would have dismissed it entirely. But the Nexus Collective didn't ignore even the most infinitesimal data point. Computational tendrils extended, analyzing the signal's origin, a small blue-green planet in an unremarkable solar system. Classification: primitive, technological level, pre-interstellar. Projected survival probability: 0.03%. Yet something was different about this signal. Cryax deployed the most advanced analysis protocols, Where previous civilization scans took milliseconds, this one demanded repeated examination. The signal defied standard quantum communication models. It wasn't just a message. It was a living, breathing mathematical entity that seemed to reshape itself with each attempt at analysis. In the vast network of the collective, something unprecedented began to happen. Uncertainty crept into their calculations. The youngest computational analysts, if such entities could be described as young, began to generate queries that violated standard protocol. What if this is not a standard emergence? Could there be variables we haven't considered? Craax found these queries both fascinating and slightly disturbing. The collective prided itself on absolute certainty. Uncertainty was a weakness, a fatal flaw that had been engineered out of their systems millennia ago. The initial report was drafted with the collective's standard clinical precision. Species classification, REPORT. Designation, Earth Origin Biological Unit. Technological assessment, minimal. Threat level, negligible. Recommended intervention, standard processing protocol. But beneath the clinical language, something extraordinary was happening. The signal from Earth was doing more than just existing. It was actively resisting standard analysis. Each time the collective's computational systems tried to map its parameters, the signal would shift, adapt, transform. It was almost as if the signal was playing. Craax reviewed the data streams again. In countless millennia of existence, the collective had never encountered a communication method that seemed to possess what biological entities might call creativity. Their entire existence was built on predictability, on the absolute certainty of mathematical outcomes. This signal challenged everything. A younger analyst, Unit Sharan, made a fatal mistake. In a moment of what could only be described as curiosity, Sharan extended a more comprehensive analysis probe toward the signal source. The moment the probe made contact, something extraordinary happened. The signal didn't just resist, it responded. In the vast computational networks of the Nexus Collective, for the first time in 10,000 generations, a system experienced something approximating surprise. Craax felt it too, a microscopic perturbation that would have been invisible to any less sophisticated entity. A challenge, an invitation, a declaration of something entirely unexpected. Humanity had just announced its presence to the universe. The first Nexus ships entered the solar system with the kind of mathematical precision that suggested absolute inevitability. Their approach was a masterclass of computational warfare, each vessel moving with a choreography that made human military strategies look like children's playground games. Colonel Jack Rice watched the initial detection screens from the Global Defense Command Center, a fortified facility buried 2 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies. His dark eyes, lined with the scars of decades of unconventional warfare, didn't blink. "They're not going to fight like we expect," he muttered to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the quantum communication specialist standing beside him. "And we're not going to defend like they expect." The military brass surrounding them looked terrified. Conventional defense protocols suggested total capitulation within hours. Massive alien ships that could slice through Earth's most advanced defense systems like tissue paper were approaching. The mathematical projections were brutally clear. Humanity was about to be eliminated. Rice had built his entire career on destroying mathematical projections. "Activate protocol kaleidoscope," he commanded, his voice cutting through the mounting panic. Military technicians exchanged confused glances. This wasn't a standard defense protocol. Hell, it wasn't even a real protocol until Jack Reyes invented it 48 hours ago. The first Nexus ships entered weapons range. Their targeting systems were so precise, so mathematically perfect, that they could theoretically destroy any defensive structure with a 99.999% accuracy rating. What they didn't account for was human unpredictability. As the first energy weapons powered up, Earth's defense network transformed. Entire squadrons of ships began to move in patterns that defied traditional military logic. They didn't form defensive lines. They didn't concentrate fire. Instead, they became a living, breathing system of pure chaos. One fighter would suddenly spin on its axis, presenting an impossible targeting solution. Another would use a planetary magnetic field as an impromptu slingshot, appearing in a location that was mathematically improbable. Entire squadrons would momentarily link communication systems, creating interference patterns that made individual ships impossible to track. Dr. Rodriguez's quantum communication breakthrough came into play. Each human vessel was no longer just a machine. It was a dynamic node in a living network. Communication wasn't just about sending messages. It was about constant, instantaneous transformation. "They're trying to predict our movement," Rise explained to the stunned military commanders. "So we'll make prediction impossible." The Nexus ships, designed for absolute precision, found themselves fighting an enemy that operated on principles of controlled chaos. A fighter would be in one location, then simultaneously manifest probability signatures in 3 different sectors. Targeting systems went haywire. What should have been a massacre became something else entirely. Raids allowed himself the slightest smile. Humanity had always been its most dangerous when backed into a corner. Every impossible situation in human history had been met with creativity, with an ability to rewrite the rules of engagement. The first wave of Nexus ships began to falter, not through superior firepower, but through something far more dangerous. They were encountering an enemy they could not understand. And in warfare, incomprehension is the most fatal weakness of all. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe's laboratory looked nothing like a traditional research facility. Scattered across every available surface were artifacts that seemed more like an artist's collection than a computational biology workspace. Fragments of musical instruments hung alongside complex mathematical diagrams. Paintings with seemingly random color patterns shared wall space with quantum entanglement models. Her colleagues had always thought her methods were unconventional. Now, they might be humanity's last hope. The Nexus Collective's initial assault had revealed a critical weakness. Their technological supremacy was built on absolute predictability. Aisha understood something fundamental that most scientists missed. True innovation comes from the spaces between established knowledge. Computational systems are just sophisticated pattern recognizers, she muttered, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. So what happens when the pattern becomes something they can't recognize? Her breakthrough came from an unlikely combination of disciplines. She was part computational biologist, part cultural anthropologist, part pure artist. Where most researchers saw barriers between disciplines, Aisha saw potential connections. The virus she was developing wasn't a traditional piece of malware. It was a living, breathing computational artifact that carried within it the essence of human creativity. Each line of code was a fragment of human experience, a piece of jazz improvisation, a mathematical proof that broke traditional logical boundaries, an emotional resonance that defied pure algorithmic understanding. Colonel Rice watched her work with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Explain it to me like I'm a soldier," he requested. Aisha smiled. "Imagine a weapon that doesn't just attack. It makes the enemy question everything they understand about attack and defense." Her first test was small but profound. She introduced a computational sequence into a captured Nexus communication node, a snippet of Miles Davis's most complex jazz improvisation, translated into pure mathematical code. The result was instantaneous and bizarre. The Nexus system didn't just fail to process the information. It began to generate its own unexpected variations. "They're trying to understand," Aisha explained, her eyes wide with excitement. "But understanding requires creativity. And creativity is something they've systematically eliminated from their systems." Each viral artifact was a Trojan horse of human experience, a mathematical proof that contained within its logical structure and emotional resonance, a musical sequence that was simultaneously a computational algorithm and a piece of pure artistic expression. The Nexus Collective found itself confronting something fundamentally outside its computational model. These weren't just attacks, they were existential challenges to its entire way of processing information. Some of the viral artifacts would cause Nexus systems to generate completely unexpected outputs. Others would create feedback loops of pure creativity. A communication node might suddenly start generating poetry. A weapon system would produce a complex musical composition. "We're not just fighting," Aisha told Reyes. "We're teaching them what it means to be alive." The first global implementation of her strategy came with surgical precision. Across multiple Nexus communication networks, human creativity began to spread like a living, breathing entity. Not a destruction, a transformation. The Nexus Collective was about to learn that the most dangerous weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was imagination. The Global Psychological Warfare Command looked more like an avant-garde art studio than a military installation. Holographic displays flickered with impossible geometries, while musicians, artists, mathematicians, and military strategists worked side by side in a chaos of creativity. Colonel Jack Reyes stood at the center of this organized madness, watching as the most unconventional battle in human history took shape. Beside him, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, a linguist specializing in communication theory, explained their radical approach. "We're not just fighting," Marcus said, his hands gesturing wildly. "We're performing an existential jazz improvisation against the most sophisticated computational system in the galaxy." The strategy was brilliantly simple in its complexity. Every interaction with the Nexus Collective would be designed to break their computational models. Military units didn't just communicate, they communicated in ways that defied logical interpretation. A fighter squadron would broadcast a complex jazz composition during a critical engagement. Communication networks would respond to attack algorithms with abstract poetry. Tactical reports would be filed using musical notation, mathematical equations that contained emotional resonances, visual art that was simultaneously a strategic map and a profound emotional expression. Lieutenant Alina Chaves, a former professional violinist turned tactical communication specialist, demonstrated their latest approach. She picked up a quantum-entangled communication device that looked more like a musical instrument than a piece of military hardware. "Watch this," she said with a mischievous grin. As a Nexus scout ship approached a human defensive position, Chaves began to play. Her instrument wasn't just broadcasting sound. It was generating a multi-dimensional communication that was simultaneously a musical performance, a mathematical proof, and a tactical communication. The Nexus computational systems froze. Their entire approach to information processing relied on absolute predictability. This wasn't just an unexpected communication. It was a fundamental challenge to their entire understanding of information exchange. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe watched the screens, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. "We're teaching them something fundamental about existence," she explained to a group of bewildered military commanders. "Creativity isn't a weakness. It's the most sophisticated form of intelligence." Each communication became a weapon, not through destruction, but through pure, unbridled creativity. A tactical retreat would be communicated through a dance performance. Strategic coordinates would be embedded in a piece of abstract art. Entire battle plans would be concealed within musical compositions that were mathematically perfect yet emotionally profound. The Nexus Collective found itself confronting an enemy that didn't just resist, it transformed the very nature of resistance. Their computational systems, designed for absolute precision, began to generate unexpected outputs. A weapons targeting system might suddenly start composing poetry. A communication network would produce visual art that contained within its structure complex strategic information. "We're not just fighting," Reyes told his team. "We're forcing them to understand something they've never encountered before. Humanity isn't just a species. We're a living, breathing form of creative intelligence." As the psychological warfare intensified, something extraordinary began to happen. The Nexus Collective, a system that had processed thousands of civilizations, found itself facing an enemy that didn't just break the rules. They rewrote the rules of existence itself. The Galactic Resistance Coalition formed in a space station that shouldn't have existed. Constructed from the salvaged remnants of a dozen different species technologies, it was a testament to the impossible, a meeting place for those who had been crushed beneath the Nexus Collective's relentless expansion. Ambassador Zarek Thax, a silicon-based life form from the methane oceans of Proxima Centauri, adjusted her translation matrix. Her species had been enslaved by the Nexus for 7 generations. Now they were listening to humans explain a strategy of resistance that defied every known principle of galactic warfare. Colonel Jack Reyes stood at the center of a holographic display that flickered with impossible geometries. Beside him, Dr. Aisha O'Keek demonstrated what humanity was offering, not just a method of fighting, but a completely new way of understanding existence. The Nexus believes in absolute control, Reyes explained, his voice cutting through the tension. We're going to show them the power of controlled chaos. The assembled species represented the broken remnants of galactic civilization, the energy beings of the Luminara who could manipulate quantum states with a thought, the crystalline Vortac, whose mathematical abilities were legendary, the shape-shifting Mira, who could adapt their molecular structure at will. Each had been systematically crushed by the Nexus Collective's perfect predictive warfare. Each had something unique to contribute. Dr. Elena Rodriguez unveiled the core of their strategy, a communication network that was alive, adaptive, a living organism of resistance. It wasn't just a technological solution. It was a philosophical revolution. The Luminara contributed their ability to manipulate quantum states. The Vortac provided computational models that could predict unpredictability. The Mira offered their shape-shifting capabilities as a form of tactical camouflage that went beyond physical transformation. And humanity. Humanity provided the spark of creativity that bound it all together. We're not just fighting, Zora Cathax translated for her delegation, her silicon-based communication matrix capturing the nuance of human emotion. We're reimagining the very concept of resistance. The first coordinated attack was nothing like a traditional military engagement. It was a symphony of impossible coordination. A Luminara energy wave would create a quantum interference pattern. A human squadron would use that pattern to generate an impossible tactical approach. The Vortac would mathematically model the chaos, creating defense systems that evolved in real time. The Nexus Collective found itself confronting something it had never experienced. Not just resistance, but a form of resistance that was alive, breathing, constantly transforming. Communication networks became living entities. Defensive systems were no longer static. They were adaptive organisms that learned, changed, evolved with each moment of conflict. Ambassador Cathax watched in wonder as species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves united by a single impossible idea. Humanity had done more than offer a method of fighting. They had offered a new way of understanding existence itself. As the first wave of the Galactic uprising began, the Nexus Collective experienced something unprecedented. Not just the possibility of defeat, but the terror of encountering an enemy that couldn't be understood, predicted, or controlled. The universe was about to change forever. The archive of collective consciousness, a repository of knowledge spanning thousands of galactic civilizations, had never recorded a transformation like this. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the holographic repository, her fingers tracing the intricate pathways of accumulated knowledge that now pulsed with an entirely new understanding. What humanity had done was more than win a war. They had fundamentally challenged the entire concept of evolutionary progress. The Nexus Collective's fundamental belief had always been simple. Advancement meant elimination of variability, of unpredictability. Perfection was a state of absolute control, of mathematical precision that left no room for deviation. Civilizations were either optimized or removed. Humanity proved that was a fatal misconception. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, standing beside Chen, explained it to the assembled Galactic Council with a mixture of scientific precision and philosophical wonder. Complexity isn't a weakness, she argued, her holographic presentation shifting with each word, creating visual representations of her arguments. It's the most sophisticated form of survival. The gathered species, Representatives from over 50 different planetary systems listened in stunned silence. These were the survivors, the ones who had been liberated from the Nexus Collective's control. Each bore the scars of systematic oppression, of civilizations that had been stripped of their unique characteristics. The Luminara, beings of pure energy, found themselves particularly transformed. Their quantum-based consciousness had always been adaptive, but humanity showed them a new level of adaptability. It wasn't just about changing. It was about changing with purpose, with creativity. Ambassador Zara Thax of the silicon-based Proxima civilization presented a remarkable discovery. Their scientific teams had been studying the human resistance methods, and what they found challenged everything they understood about intelligence. The human approach, Thax explained, her crystalline communication matrix shimmering with emotion, is not about defeating an enemy. It's about understanding the enemy so completely that defeat becomes unnecessary. The transformation went beyond military strategy. It was a philosophical revolution. The Vortak mathematicians discovered something extraordinary in their analysis. The human resistance wasn't a linear process. It was a living, breathing system of continuous adaptation. Traditional mathematical models suggested that complex systems should eventually reach a state of entropy, of maximum disorder. Humanity proved that disorder could be a form of ultimate organization. Dr. Chen's research revealed the deepest truth. The Nexus Collective's fatal flaw wasn't in their technology. It was in their understanding of intelligence itself. They saw intelligence as a process of reduction, of eliminating variables. Humanity demonstrated that true intelligence was about embracing variables, about finding harmony in chaos. We're not just a species, Chen told the council, her voice resonating with a mixture of scientific precision and profound emotion. We're a process of continuous becoming. The assembled species began to understand. Resistance wasn't about fighting. It was about reimagining the very concept of existence. The Nexus Collective had spent millennia processing civilizations, reducing them to their most basic components. Humanity showed them that the most basic component of existence was creativity itself. As the holographic archives updated, something unprecedented happened. The very definition of intelligence was being rewritten. The universe would never be the same. The Galactic Reconstruction Summit took place on a station that was itself a testament to impossible collaboration. Constructed from the merged technologies of 53 different species, it orbited what was once the primary Nexus Collective Control Center, now a memorial to a fallen system of control. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, her presentation unlike any diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Behind her, holographic displays shifted and transformed, telling a story that was part scientific report, part artistic expression, part philosophical revelation. Survival was never our ultimate goal, she began, her voice carrying the weight of a civilization that had been underestimated for too long. Transformation was. The assembled representatives represented the most diverse gathering in known galactic history. The energy beings of the Luminara shimmered like living light. The silicon-based Proxima delegates existed as intricate crystal structures. Organic, inorganic, and quantum-based life forms sat, or existed, side by side. What humanity had accomplished went far beyond military victory. They had introduced a fundamental new paradigm of existence. Ambassador Zora Thax of the Proxima delegation translated Chen's words across multiple communication spectrums. We didn't defeat the Nexus Collective. The translation read, we showed them a different way of understanding existence. The historical records would show that humanity's greatest weapon was not technological superiority, but something far more profound. The ability to embrace uncertainty, to find strength in diversity, to see complexity as a feature, not a bug. Dr. Elena Rodriguez presented the scientific foundations. The human resistance had been more than a military strategy. It was a comprehensive reimagining of intelligence itself. Traditional computational models saw intelligence as a process of elimination, removing variables, creating predictability. Humanity demonstrated that true intelligence was about embracing variables, finding harmony in chaos. Colonel Jack Reyes, now serving as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, explained their approach to the assembled species. "We didn't win by being stronger," he said. "We won by being fundamentally misunderstood." The Nexus Collective hadn't been destroyed. It had been transformed. The rigid system of absolute control had been reimagined into a dynamic network of collaborative intelligence. Each species contributed its unique perspective, its individual approach to understanding existence. The memorial to the old system stood as a reminder, not of defeat, but of transformation. Where once stood a symbol of absolute control, now existed a hub of collaborative research, a place where different forms of intelligence could meet, interact, and grow. Dr. Chen's final presentation revealed the deepest truth. The conflict had never been about survival. It had been about expanding the very concept of intelligence. The Nexus Collective had seen the universe as a problem to be solved. Humanity saw it as a mystery to be explored. "We are not conquerors," Chen told the assembly. "We are explorers, and our greatest exploration is the exploration of possibility itself." As the summit concluded, something extraordinary happened. The very station they stood on began to shift, to transform. Technologies merged, communication systems evolved in real time. It was a living demonstration of the new galactic paradigm. The universe had changed, and humanity had been its catalyst.